make a difference. Together, through our focused individual and collective efforts, we can control the spread of COVID-19 and continue to rise to the challenges before us. With that, I'll now turn it over to Councillor Cressy to deliver his remarks.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tory and Dr. Davila. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our Team Toronto Kids 5 to 11-year-old vaccine campaign. 10 weeks ago today, we administered the first pediatric vaccine in Canada. Alongside Sick Kids Hospital and with superheroes and stickers and animal paw prints and even a coloring station, we launched with that very first shot. This was before Omicron, and it was before our accelerated third dose booster campaign, just 10 weeks ago. Now, since then, Team Toronto Kids has continued nonstop. And just like our overall vaccination campaign, which is now over 90% for first doses for those over the age of 12, Team Toronto Kids is a marathon at a sprinting pace. And to carry on that analogy, with 5 to 11-year-olds, we've passed the halfway mark. Now, in the last 10 weeks, as Dr. Davila noted, Team Toronto has administered 158,000 doses of vaccines to kids 5 to 11 years old. 54% of 5 to 11-year-olds have their first dose and 23% have their second. Our multi-pronged clinic model has included city-run mass immunization clinics, hospital clinics, pharmacies, family doctors, and school clinics. And thus far, a little more than 50% of the kids' doses have been administered at mass immunization clinics. Now, we know that education and outreach is critical, especially for parents and caregivers. To that end, thus far, we've hosted 140 webinars for parents and caregivers, 2 telephone town halls for 101,000 participants, and our partners at Sick Kids have held more than 1,100 individual consultations with parents and caregivers. And just like with our first dose campaign for adults, we've been working to bring vaccines directly to where people are, in this case, directly to schools where kids are. And as Dr. Davila noted, thus far we've hosted 436 school-based clinics in 38 targeted neighborhoods where vaccine rates have been lower and COVID rates have been higher. And so overall, take all this together, we're off to a really strong start and we're pleased with the progress, but there is more work to do. And just like with the adult vaccine campaign last summer, with kids, we've entered a new phase. This is the hyper-local phase. And so here's what that looks like. In the last 2 weeks, we accelerated school-based clinics and we increased direct outreach to parents and caregivers in targeted neighborhoods. And in those 2 weeks, 90 school-based clinics were held, and we partnered with the Toronto District and the Toronto Catholic District School Boards to ensure that parents were called, texted, and emailed in advance of those school clinics. And it's working. So let me paint the picture. In the last 2 weeks, for example, in Rexdale, in Malvern, and in Scarborough Village, in those 3 neighborhoods where we focused, we saw kids' vaccine rates increase by more than 5%. 5% increase in 2 weeks in some of our targeted neighborhoods. That compared to a citywide neighborhood average increase of about 2%. Now, not to get lost in the numbers, this is what a successful hyper-local strategy looks like in this phase. It's local, it's targeted, it takes effort, and it can take time, but it works. You know, our 12 to 17-year-old vaccine campaign took 24 weeks to reach 90% of teens with the first dose. And we got there because we never stopped. School by school, kid by kid, we build trust and we break down barriers. That's the Team Toronto way that Mayor Tory always describes. So what's next? We're continuing to accelerate this hyper-local approach. We have 57 clinics planned in schools over the next 2 weeks. We're continuing to scale up outreach to parents in targeted neighborhoods, working really closely with the school boards. And we're building off the success of recent big events we held, like Vax the Northwest and the Family Roll Call Weekend in Scarborough with Scarborough Health Network, with planning underway for more big events throughout February. And so let me close with this message. You know, I remember at the 10-week mark of the adult vaccination campaign last spring, At that time, nearly everybody told us we couldn't possibly reach 90% vaccine uptake in a city like ours. But we did it because Torontonians stepped up. In a city with 3 million people, with 200 different ethnocultural groups where 180 languages are spoken, Torontonians rallied together to protect each other. It truly has been an incredible act of unity. And just like that adult campaign, Team Toronto Kids will get there. This is a marathon, and we have the tools, we have the team, we have the plan to reach every kid everywhere, and we're going to continue to do just that. With that, I'll turn the floor over to Lavin to open it up for questions.
Thank you. We will now take questions from the media. As a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up. We will unmute you when it's your turn. We do also have staff on the line from Transportation, Solid Waste Management, Shelter Support and Housing, Technology Services, and Revenue Services if you do have any specific questions. First up, we have Felipe from Radio Canada. Go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Mayor Tory. So City Council will be voting tomorrow on a motion asking the province to implement a speculation tax and a home flipping tax. So do you think that these policies would actually help cool off the housing market? And even if the motion is approved by City Council, how confident are you that the Ford government will look at implementing such taxes?
If you look at the foundation of all of the policies we've adopted in terms of trying to improve the availability of housing, including affordable housing, a lot of it has been with a view to placing first the notion that people are to live in homes and homes are for people to live in. And so I think that these kinds of measures, and we're asking the province through this motion to consider a speculation tax of this kind and these kinds of measures, because we believe that it's all hands on deck in terms of taking that fundamental premise, which is that homes are for people to live in, and making sure you can place that at the top of the priority list. Homes are for people to invest in as well, but you can never let the financial aspects of this surpass the obligation that we have to find more homes for more people to live in, hopefully as affordably as possible. So it is something that I think is a worthwhile signal for us to send as a city council, given the challenge we face in terms of finding housing for people in our city. It is for their consideration, and I think that they're looking too for different ways in which we can make sure as many housing units are available to people as affordably as possible, and these are two of the ways that Councillor Cole has identified that might be examined, and I'm supporting the province having a look at those.
And how confident would you say that you are that the Ford government will actually look at those tax options? And does the fact that it's an election year come into play in this?
I don't know whether election year has any impact on these things. We've already put a vacant home tax in place ourselves, and I think that's going to be a step forward again on the theory that we need homes for people to live in. As many other purposes as there may be as an investment vehicle and things like that, we need people to be able to live in these homes. I think that the government, through its summit that it had a week or so ago, the reports that it's commissioned and so on, has indicated its interest in looking at a wide variety of measures to make sure that we have as many homes as affordably as possible for people to live in as possible, and so I'm sure they'll take a look at these things alongside many others.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jennifer Peglero from The Star. Go ahead.
Hey there, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to start by asking Dr. Davila a question. Dr. Davila, I wanted to know, it seems like we're kind of at this point where vaccines are for the most part, widely accessible for kids and adults. And there seems to be a recognition that we can't simply keep people locked down and businesses closed. And so I'm just wondering, given the numbers that you've seen, are we really relying on, individual residents to keep each other safe, keep their families safe? Are we at that point in the pandemic where the time for a government intervention is maybe on the back burner here?
Jennifer, that's an interesting question. Let me see how best I can provide you with a response. I would say that you'll have noted throughout the course of the entire pandemic that we've had to adjust and change our responses along with changing circumstances. And of course, informed by the science, which also has evolved over the course of the pandemic. So, I think that at this point in the pandemic, you're continuing us to see, to see us, I should say, deploy the best available science in order to provide the best response, to what we're seeing on the ground. What we've seen as of late is with the arrival of Omicron, we have this incredibly transmissible variant. And that, perhaps, the goal of elimination isn't really within reach. But what we have is the lessons we've learned over 2 years now. And we have some very, very effective tools. We have vaccine available to us. And, while you can say that vaccine is widely accessible, our experience on the ground has been that there are still some challenges for people in respect of accessing vaccine. Hence, you see us use that very hyper-local method that Councillor Cressy just spoke of in order to make sure that we're reducing barriers as much as possible. It took us some time to get to 90% of our 12-plus population with 1 dose of vaccine on board. We're going to continue our efforts to keep driving up vaccine coverage to make sure that as many people as possible are getting that protective benefit of vaccine. You've also seen Torontonians step up over the course of the past 2 years with respect to practicing good self-protection measures, and we know that these still work. So as far as I'm concerned, we do know that there are tools we have in our toolkit. I think it's beholden on all of us to use the tools as best we can. And to my mind, it's a combination of both individual and collective efforts that have gotten us this far. And I think it's going to be the combination of those two kinds of efforts that will continue to see us well into the future.
And just given the numbers you've seen, I know you said, I believe last week, that it was difficult to say whether we've seen Omicron peak at this point. There's some new numbers out today, new data available to you this week. Would it be fair to say that the worst of this wave is behind us, acknowledging obviously that a reopening brings some risk of increase, but hopefully not a substantial amount?
Well, Jen, I think you've hit the nail exactly on the head. We've certainly seen positive indications of declining COVID activity, as I've discussed today in the remarks. Hence, I've described my feeling of cautious optimism. We have reason to be optimistic because our indicators are moving in the right direction. But just as you mentioned, with reopening, there is more opportunity for COVID spread to happen within the community. The good news is we have really effective tools available for us to use. So whether we're talking about vaccination or we're talking about the use of self-protection measures, things like masking, physical distancing, ventilation, all the things that we know actually make a difference to reduce the spread of COVID-19, those in combination with vaccination are the kinds of things we need to continue to do in order to see our progress be sustained and maintained for the long haul.
Councillor Cressy, I believe you have something to add to that.
Well, Jennifer, I just wanted to add that Eileen spoke of cautious optimism, and I think the reason for the most significant optimism remains vaccines. The vaccines have proven to be effective in protecting against harm from the Omicron variant. And the reason to be optimistic beyond that is that Torontonians continue to step up to do their part to protect themselves and each other with vaccines. We've approached nearly 60% already of those eligible with a booster dose already. And that's in addition to over 90% of those over the age of 12 having already got their first dose. And so that's a reason for profound optimism, because Torontonians have done their part, and because of that, I think the path forward is a safer one. And so we should all be optimistic for that reason.
Okay, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.